Hi everyone, welcome back in the second part of building the code and quiz application using React, TypeScript, and Next.js and Tailwind CSS for styling. So before I start talking about or we jumping into the project, so why not just promote something that I built and it's totally free, and I think it's going to solve a problem, which is every time that you want to build a project, so you are wasting a bit of time setting up things like installing the ShadcnUI, installing the font, and installing some of the packages. So this is going to generate this for you and also save some time and just focusing on building the project. So you'll find the link down below in the description. So it's completely free for now. So when I click on the Get Started Now, so as you can see, you will go through this stepper to be able to generate the project that you want. So I'm gonna type in stuff randomly in here. You can be able to select the icon of the application. So I'm gonna add something in here and I'm gonna click on next. And then you can be able to customize things like the border radius. Also, you can be able to change the font, and also you can change the color, the head and size as well. And after this, you can generate the boilerplate code and so I program it in a way that all of the things that you set up, like the styling, it's going to be generated automatically. And when you click on the generate, so you will find a new the boilerplate code has been generated. So all you have to do, open this up and extract this into a folder and open it up inside the VS Code. Type in npm install all the dependencies, and you are ready to go. So let's go back to our project. So, and also one thing that I want to remind you with is you can find the source code down below in the description if you don't want to waste time upon this project, but it is not for free. So just to support me, like building these projects and sustaining this channel. So if you want to, of course, and also if you want to see the full project, you can find it live down below in the description as well. So it is deployed into the Vercels servers. So now let's jump into our project, and also make sure if you didn't watch the first video, so you will find down below the playlist link. So to go back to the first video, start from there before like starting from the second video, which doesn't make any sense. So the next thing that I added into the all quizzes tab. So now when I click or I choose any language that I want, as you can see, we're having the title and the text is changing based on the language that I choose. And so for the rest of the page, so we're having the difficulties, the beginner, intermediate, and the advanced. So as you can see, um, all the cards are the same because uh, I didn't introduce the data yet. So we're gonna use one component, and we're gonna reuse it over and over again just to see how things are looking first before we start like using the data. So let's go back to the VS Code, and I'm going to show you all the things that I did to create this. So inside the main area folder, so as you can see, I created the all quizzes tab. So here we are going to store for each tab or for each language, it's going to be stored inside its own file. And what we're going to do, we're going to call each file inside the tab. So we're going to go to the all quizzes.tsx, which is the component that is responsible to render this whole part underneath the all quizzes tab when it is selected. And at the bottom, we're going to go to the tabs content, and here we are going to call each component. Like for the tab content related to JavaScript, we're going to call JavaScript tab. The same thing for TypeScript, the same thing for Python, and the same thing for Golang. So now I'm gonna go through the code for each tab. So everything that is inside this tab, it's gonna be the same for the other tabs or for the other languages, since we are gonna just change the text. So here, as you can see inside the component, so this is the main div. So we're having the h2 tag saying explore JavaScript quizzes and the p tag. So we can be able to create one component and reuse it over and over again, but that's gonna make things a bit complex. So I want to just make sure even that it is redundant, but I want to make sure that it's beginner friendly so you can be able to understand what's going on in here. And even for this code, you can use an array and just to actually shrink a bit of the code and map through each element instead of doing it like this way. So it's not recommended into a production level application, but just for the sake of this one, so I let it as it is. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to actually call this render difficulty. So this render difficulty function, which is in another function called the helper functions.tsx. So what this actually does, it's going to just render this icon, the difficulty, and the beginner. And also it's going to handle the colors as well, depending on the level. So that's why in the render difficulty, so it's going to be a union type of little types that we set ourselves just to make sure that this function is type safe. So it is beginner and intermediate and advanced. And here inside the return function, so we're going to return this GSX. So as you can see, this part is going to be always the same, but what is going to actually change is this part. So as you can see, we are using the difficulty parameter that is coming from the print component, and we are just putting it in here. But the thing that is happening in here to be able to actually change the color depending on the difficulty, so we're gonna create an outer function. So instead of like putting everything inside one variable and using ternary operators, turn operator. Sorry, that could be very messy and very hard to read. And so I used the switch method and depending on the difficulty. So if it is a beginner, so we're going to return the text green. For the intermediate, we're going to use the yellow, and advanced, we're going to use the red color, and the default it's going to be green. So basically, we put this function in one file because it's going to be reused 3 times. So it's going to be used for the beginner to be able to show the beginner color, the intermediate, and the advanced. And underneath each one, we are going to use this just in an array, just temporarily to be able to actually render or call the single component, the single quiz component, and render it this way. But once we start working with data, so eventually this it's going to be eliminated, and we're going to create a new structure that I'm going to show you to be able to show the single quizzes or the number of them based on the data that we are going to export from another file. So we're going to keep doing the same thing for the intermediate difficulty and the advanced difficulty. So I need to change this comment so uh, so it's not gonna actually interfere with this code because it's just a comment. So this code, it's going to be applied in all the files. So it's going to be the same thing like for TypeScript. As you can see, we're going to use the same logic. So the only thing that is going to be changing, as I said, is the text. So this is how we can be able to actually, and I think that the dashboard element is completed. And so the only thing that I need to add at the top is this drop down to be able to show this, but it's not important. So the thing that we are going to start working on is the quiz design or template. So after we completed the dashboard UI, so the next thing that we're going to start working on is the quiz and the UI of the quiz, and also we're going to add some of the things um, just to create a baseline for the logic that we're going to be adding in the future. So as you can see, we are going to create a new route. So I called it quiz, and also we're going to use this. So this is going to refer to the ID of each quiz, and it's going to be a dynamic route, and I'm going to show you how to do this in Next.js. So first we're going to start by the header. So I'm just, so I'm just using this generic name and the level, and here we're going to be adding the icon, and here the progress and the submit button. So let's go back to the VS Code to show you how to create this. So of course we need to create a new route. So let me close this first. So we need to create the quiz route, and to be able to actually make the ID dynamic, so we're going to use the square brackets. And inside of it, then we can be able to add the page.tsx and the layout.tsx. So first, before I start talking about the code inside these two files, so I want to talk about the context API. So that's the reason why I created the layout.tsx, so we can be able to wrap our page.tsx with the quiz provider, so we can be able to share states between all the child components within the page.tsx. So that's why I created the context API. So I'm going to go through this very quickly to create a context API, which is a boilerplate, so it's very simple to understand. So first, we are going to create our interface. So I called it the quiz context type, and we need to create our context that is going to accept either the quiz context type and the or null. So it's going to be by default null. And inside the quiz context type interface, so we're going to be adding all the types of the states and the functions that we're going to be adding inside this context API. And the context provider, which is a functional component, is going to accept children as a React.node. And here we are going to wrap this children between the quiz context that we created, that provider, and we're going to provide the values. So the values are going to be the states inside this object. So we're going to be creating states, and the states are going to be inside this value object, where it's going to be in the context, quiz context that provider. So all the states that are inside the values or the value object can be shared between all the components that are wrapped between the quiz provider functional component. And here we're going to create this use quiz function to be able to actually consume this context within this provider in any component that we want. So you will be able to really understand what this does once we start working with it. So after we created our context API, now to be able to actually make this useful, we're going to wrap the children, which is the layout.tsx, with the quiz provider that we created. So the layout.tsx, it's going to work pretty much the same of the main route. So mainly I added it just to be able to actually create our provider within this actual route. So now we're going to go to the page.tsx, which is the component that is responsible for rendering whatever that we are whenever we access to this route. So the first thing that as you can see, so I'm using the use params. So the reason why I did this because we need to make sure whenever the user access to this route, we want to make sure that this ID is valid. So we need to access first to this ID or the slug, whatever I want to call it. And to be able to do this, we need to use the use params hook, and so we are going to create our logic to be able to access to the data and make sure that this really resides inside this data before we can be able to actually show the question or all the questions. So we're going to work on this first, of course. And then inside this GSX, as you can see, we're having the render quiz and we're having the at the bottom the button. So the render quiz, it's going to be responsible for rendering uh, like the header and the body. So now I want to just show you the header as you can see. So we're having some GSX and this is the quiz header. So the quiz header, it's going to be in another component. Just make sure that everything is organized. So as you can see, we're having some div. So and some divs. So we're having the parent div, and we're having this. So as you can see, all of this is going to be within one div, and we're having another component called the progress bar to be able to show this progress bar as you can see. So we're having the quiz name and we're having the level. So the progress bar, it's going to be in another component. I called it the circular progress bar. So I did the same thing for the circular progress bar in the dashboard. So I asked ChatGPT to come up with this. So the only thing that I did, I added the percentage as a prompt so you can be able to actually like pass down whatever number. So when we start working with the data, so we are going to do some calculation whenever we are going to the next question. So we need to pass down the percentage after doing the calculation so we can be able to actually change the circle. So this is basically the main code or the backbone of the actual quiz page. So we're going to be adding some of the things, some of the logic, but making sure that everything is organized like this, it's very helpful, especially when things are going to get more complex and you don't get overwhelmed by the logic that will produce to make this working. So after we created the header of this page, the two components that I added simultaneously is the part to be able to actually select the answer and also the question, and also this component to be able to see where we are at in all the questions that are inside this quiz, but also to see what are the questions that we submitted so far. So let's go back to the VS Code to show you how I created this. So we're gonna start from the page.tsx, which is the main component that renders the page, the quiz page. So we're gonna start from the render quiz. Sorry for this. And so I'm gonna access to the render quiz, and the two components that I added is the quiz body and the quiz questions list. So let's go to the quiz body. So the quiz body is gonna be inside this quiz body.tsx. So I'm gonna go over this code very quickly. So we're having the main div, so we're gonna return this GSX, and inside the span tag, so we're gonna render the question, and then we're going to use an ordered list, and inside of it we are going to use this area. So this area is going to be just temporarily until we create our data structure. So all of this, it's going to be changed But first, I want to just show you the structure and the ideal logic that we use to be able to create these components. So we're having the items as a string, and then we're going to map to each element, and we're going to call this function inside the map function. And so here we're going to call for each option the quiz option component. So I created it in a separate place, so in another function just to make things organized. And this quiz option functional component is going to accept two elements, the option index. So the reason why we are going to pass down the option index because first we're going to use it as a key property inside the LA tag, and also we're gonna use it inside this function that I'm gonna get into. And here we are gonna pass down, of course, the option, which is by now it's only a string, and then we are going to actually use this option that we passed down from the parent component inside this div, so you can be able to render it like this in each element. So, and also I'm going to explain why we use the is hovered. So the hover logic is normally handled by CSS or Tailwind CSS. So as you can see, and the main LA tag, which represents each answer. So we are going to use the hover utility class or the hover element inside the class name to be able to actually handle when I hover over each element, the background, it's going to be like this with the uh, primary color. But the reason why I added because I want to actually change the color of this rectangle whenever I hover over this element. So I had to use the is hovered state for this. So that's why we created the state, and to be able to actually change this state, we are going to rely on these two event listener, the on mouse enter and the on mouse leave. So it's pretty self-explanatory. So when I enter this element, so this is going to be triggered, this event listener, and the is hovered state is going to be set to true. And for the event listener on mouse leave, it's going to be set back the is hovered state to false. And then we're going to use this state inside this div, which represents each rectangle where the letter is in, and we're going to use it inside this class name. So if it is true, the background primary color, it's going to be, so we're going to use the background since we are using ShadcnUI and the text is going to be white. Otherwise, we're going to use the background slate, which is the default color, as you can see for each rectangle. So after this, I'm going to actually explain this render question later. So this function is very simple. So what we are going to do, we are going to, instead of like rendering 1, 2, 3, 4, we want to render the A and B and C. So it looks a lot better like using letter than numbers, and this is what it is used in the quizzes. So what we are going to do, we are going to accept the index. So the index it's going to be this parameter. So the reason why we added one, since the option index is going to be 0 by default, because in an array all the indexes start by 0, so we need to add one. And we are going to use the switch case method. And so if it is 1, we are going to return A, the same thing for 2, the same thing for 3, and the same thing for 4. So I'm going to stick with 4 options or 4 probabilities. So because this is what we're going to create in the data structure. So after that, we're going to actually call this function inside the span tag, and depending on how many elements that we are going to get into the array. So we are going to render based on the number of the indexes. Like for example, if I get rid from this element and hit save, and I reload the page. So we're gonna have only the A and B and C, as you can see. So this is for how we can create these components. And now, I think that there is a issue, so a small issue with the key index, and I think that I need so 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 it isn't a very big of an issue, so I'm gonna fix this. But overall, this is how we can create the structure of this page. So after we created the design of the quiz page, the next thing that we need to do, we need to actually populate all the uh, information with the real data. But before we can do this, first we need to create the data or the structure of the data that we're going to be using. So what I did in VS Code, I created a new folder called data. And here, as you can see, all the files and the folder that I added. So I'm going to go through each one of them. And the first file that I'm going to start from is the quiz data. So this is what we're going to do, we're going to create the quizzes data object. So it's going to be so since we are gonna use static information, so we're gonna create the keys, which are the languages, and for each key, it's gonna be an array of quizzes. So this is what we're doing. Like when you see the types, so it's gonna be a record type, and so it's an object, and so it's going to take the indexes as quiz category type, meaning that like the keys are going to be only the properties that we set as a string literal types inside this union type, which is the quiz category. Like for example, if I want to add like something like HTML, so I'm going to have this error um, because we didn't set the HTML part of the quiz category type. So let me correct this. And if I add the HTML in here, as you can see, the issue is gone. So we're not going to use the HTML, so I want to just show you the main structure that we're going to use in for our main object, which is the quizzes data object. And then, so instead of like putting all the information in this file, so what I did, I'm going to call the JavaScript quiz beginner, which is an object from another file, and this one from another file. So this is why we created the JavaScript folder. And before I start talking about the quizzes data, so I want to go over through the data types. So here we're going to store the structure of uh, the quiz and the quiz question. So just to get an overall and clear idea, so this might be a little bit confusing. So I'm going to start from the JavaScript folder. So I'm going to start from the JavaScript beginner.js. So here we're going to create the JavaScript beginner quiz beginner. So it is the object, and the object is going to have the ID. So this is going to represent each quiz. So once we start adding more quizzes, so I'm going to add numbers to each name of the quiz. But for now, I'll just show you the structure of the quiz object. So we're gonna have the ID of type string, the name, the level, and the icon. And also we're going to have the quizzes array. So the quizzes array is going to accept the objects which represent each question. So for each object, it's going to have its own ID, of course. We're going to have the question, the options that we're going to be using to be able to render them in here. And of course, the question is going to be used to be able to render it in here. We're having the correct answer, we're having the explanation, and also we're having the point that the user will gain once he or she gets the right answer. So this is the overall structure. So after we created this, what we're going to do, we're going to import it right inside the JavaScript area. So I did the same thing for the JavaScript quiz intermediate. So I created in another file. So as you can see, so the only thing that is going to be changing is the data. So the structure is going to be the same. And I used ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini to be able to actually help me to come up with the questions and the answers. So one of the things that I'm planning to do in the future projects is to create an quiz, but it's going to be fully integrated with AI to be able to generate random quizzes. So this is basically the data structure that we're going to be using to be able to actually show the information inside this quiz page. So after we created the data structure, so now we are going to start adding the information from the quizzes data object into this page. So one thing that I want to show you is how we can be able to access safely to the information. Like for example, the user can add anything in here. Like if I do this, so what we are going to have in this page is the loading stage and nothing's gonna be shown up because this ID is not existing into the quizzes data object. But as soon as I do this, so I'm going to eliminate the second two number. And notice here, we can be able to access safely to the information of this quiz object. So the next thing that I want to show you, so here as you can see, we're having the name of the or the language and also the difficulty and the icon. So all of these are coming from the the object or the data that we created. But also here we're having the name of the question. And when I click on submit answer, as you can see, we're going to go to the second index and as a result, we're going to access to the next question. So first, we need to lay down the foundation of this before we start making things even more complex and adding more logic to all of this. So let's go back to the VS Code to show you what I did. And the place that I'm going to start from is the context quiz provider. So the reason, as I said, why we created this, we used the context API because these states are going to be used, are going to be shared across all the child components that we create in here. And to avoid using props, and also to avoid the problem of prop drilling. So we are gonna put these states inside the quiz provider and they're gonna be shared across all these components by using the use quiz function. So the first thing that I did, I created the current question index state. So it's going to be, of course, by default 0. And also I created the selected quiz state where we're going to be like assigning the quiz whenever we are loading the route. So you can be able to actually consume the information from this quiz across all the components that we are using inside this page. So it's going to be by default null. And of course, it's going to be either quiz of the quiz type that we created inside the data types.ts or of type null. And also we need to add these inside the quiz context type. So as you can see, these two states, the states that we created I added them inside an object just to make sure that things are organized rather than adding them line by line inside the interface, which can be a little bit hard to see and also to access to the data whenever we are consuming this context. And of course, we need to add them inside the value property or the value object that's going to be used inside the quiz context provider. So once we created our states that we're going to be using at this moment inside the context provider, so the next thing that we are going to access to is um, the page.tsx of the quiz route. So as you can see here, we are going to access to the states that we created like this by using the use quiz. And we're going to use this use effect hook. So this use effect hook, it's going to be actually triggered whenever we are loading the page. So that's why we put the ID params as an array dependency. So whenever this changes, so um, this whole code, it's going to be triggered. So let's go through this use effect hook. So first, we're going to make sure that this ID params is not undefined. Otherwise, we're going to exit this use effect hook so you can be able to access safely to this block. So here we are going to create this quizzes languages as an array. So these are the languages that we're going to be using. And then the reason why we're going to create this for loop is we can be able to extract the quiz inside the quiz's data and update it inside the selected quiz by using its own setter. So first we're gonna access to each key of the quiz languages, so we're going to access to each element inside the quizzes or the quiz languages, and then we are going to use the find method, and also we are using some utility types from Typescript just to make sure that this language is safely asserted to the type that we are using inside the quizzes data. So if we go to the quizzes data.tsx, so we want to make sure that the element that we're using inside the array correspond to the keys properties that we're using inside the quizzes data. So it is as just a TypeScript feature just to make sure that we are accessing safely to these elements and not running into any troubles. So then we are gonna make sure that the quiz ID is equal to the ID params that we got from the address bar. And if it is, so if this found quiz is not undefined, meaning that we find one, then we are going to update it inside the selected quiz, and we're gonna use the break, uh, the, the, the break to be able to actually exit the for loop. And if the selected quiz is null, we're going to return the load-in text as I showed you. So because the selected quiz is still null, we didn't find it inside the quizzes data. So we are going to just render the load-in text. And here inside the function, so this function, it's going to help us to go from one question to the next question. And for this, we're going to use the index that I showed you that we created in the context provider. So we are going to use it to be able to go from one element inside the array to another one. So whenever I click on the button, this handle next question function is going to be triggered. So I want to make sure that this is not null to access safely to all this block. And then we are going to extract the items inside each quizzes property. So now let's go back to the quizzes data.tsx just to show you what I'm talking about. So if we go to the JS beginner.ts, which is this quiz, so what we are doing, we are going to access to the how many objects that we are having inside the quizzes array. So if we go back to the page.tsx, so as you can see, so this is some kind of the path. So we're having the selected quiz dot quizzes dot length. So we're going to store the number inside the quizzes length, and then we're going to use the set current quiz question index to go next to the next quiz based on the quiz's length. So we don't run into the problem of going outside of the area, which is going to create for us an issue or an error into the code. So after I showed you this logic, the next thing that I'm going to show you is how to be able to actually show the information inside the header, but also to show the question, the question in here. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to go to the quiz header. So first, we need to use the use quiz to be able to access to the selected quiz. So as you can see, we're not using any prompts because this quiz header is part of the quiz provider, part of the context API that we created. And then we are gonna deconstruct this select quiz to be able to access to the properties inside the selected quiz. So we're having the icon, the name, and the level. So the icon, it's going to be used inside this div. So that's why we're having the icon inside this rectangle. And here we're going to render the name or the quiz name. So I just changed the name from name to the quiz name. And we're going to render the level. So that's how we can be able to actually render all of these elements from the actual quiz. Then I'm going to show you how to render this question. So this is part of the quiz body.tsx. Again, we're going to do the same thing in here. We're going to access to the current question index and the selected quiz by using the use quiz hook that we created. So first, we want to make sure that this is not null. So if it is, we're going to just render the p tag, which is the loading text. And then in here, and this is the trick. So we're going to access to the quizzes property, which is the area of object, and we're going to use the current question index. So if it is zero, we are going to access to this part. So when we click on the submit answer, it's going to be 1. Then we're going to access to this part. So this is what we're having inside the console log. So that's why I deliberately showed this just to understand what I'm doing and then to be able to access to the question. So if we go back to the quiz body.tsx, so we're gonna do dot question to be able to actually access to the only to the question because since we are accessing to the whole object, so for us we want to access only to the question. So that's why we used the dot question to actually render the question that of the index that we are at. So I don't want to just like do everything at once. I want to just show you the each thing part by part. So now I'm going to access to the elements and also I'm going to actually work on the logic of the quiz questions list. And the next thing that did is, as you can see, I added all the answers based on the question that we are in. And also another thing that I want to show you when I click on this submit answer, we're going to have please select answer since we didn't select any answer yet. So when I click on this one, so as you can see, the icon or the color, sorry, it's going to be changing, telling the user that this element or answer has been selected, and then we can go to the next question. So if I do the same thing and if I don't and select an answer and I click on submit, so we're going to have the error. So we're going to set everything up. So let's go back to the VS Code to show you what I did. So again, I'm going to start from the context quiz provider.tsx since we're going to create a new state called the selected answer. We're going to be storing the answer that we clicked on. So it's going to be either number or null. And then we are gonna actually we're gonna just create in the type of the object that we're gonna use inside the quiz context type, and then we are gonna create our state like this, and inside the value, so we need it to add these two states part of this object since we defined it this way inside this interface. So once we did this, then we are gonna go straight to the quiz body.tsx. And here I'm going to start from this part to be able to actually show all the potential answers. So what we're going to do here is the same, pretty much the same that we did to be able to access to the question. But here we're going to access to the options property. So if we go back to the quiz data.tsx or the this file, so we're having inside the quizzes property, we're having the options area. So this is what we are going to access by doing this. So that's why we're using the map function. And then we're going to iterate through each option, and we're going to call the quiz option component as I explained. So now since we are inside this file, I'm going to show you the logic that I did to be able to, when I click on here, so we're gonna have a different color. And also, whenever I click on here, we are going to actually store the index inside the selected answer state that I showed you. And this is what I'm going to explain in this functional component. So first, we're having the on-click event listener that I added inside the uh, tag. So we are going to update the selected answer by the option index. So that's why we passed it from the parent component. So we added it inside the prompt. And here we are going to actually change the color of the border based on this condition. So we put it inside another function just to make sure that things will still a bit organized inside this class name. And then we're going to call this function right inside this class name. So that's why we use the backticks and the curly braces. So only if the selected answer is equal to the option index that we are passing down from this component, then we are going to actually return this text that is going to be applied inside this class name. So this text, it's saying that the border, it's going to be border primary. So it's a Tailwind utility class saying that the border is going to be of the color of the primary color that we're using inside ShadcnUI. And also we are using some background with light color as you can see. So that's why we're using the 5 number in here. So this is basically the thing that I added inside this functional component. So now I'm going to actually show you the logic when I click on the submit answer. So for this, we're going to go to the page.tsx. So the page.tsx, we're going to add again the selected answer states that we created inside the context API. And the first thing that I did, I added this use effect hook, and the current question index, it's going to be as an array dependency. So the reason why I did this, so let me delete this. I'm going to save the file. So I'm going to reload the page just to see why I added this code and the problem that I fixed. So I'm reloading the project just to see how things are going on. So when I click on this answer and I click on the submit answer, as you can see, this it's going to be still, uh, so it's going to be still like this. And to be able to actually solve this problem, so we need to set the selected answer back to null. So when the current question index is changing or is updating, so we're not going to have this problem, and we can have all the answers or the answer is not selected. So this is why I added this use effect hook. So, and also another thing that I added inside the handle next question function. So as you can see, I added this if statement to be able to handle the case if the selected answer is not selected. And to be able to know this, so we're gonna see if the selected answer is of type object, which means that it is null. So we said that inside the quiz provider, the context API, so it could be of type number or null. So the trick here, we are going to see if it is of type of an object, meaning that it is null, it is still null. So if it is a number, so it's going to be of, so it's going to be number. So that's the logic or the reason that I did to be able to know if the selected answer has been selected or not. And then we're going to use the toast that error. So we're using the toast um, component. So if we go to the package.json, so here everything is installed. If we used the tool that I showed you to create boilerplate code, so and we're gonna show the toast, and then we can be able to access safely to this code. So hopefully that I explained all the things that I added and everything that I added so far. So I think the next thing that I'm going to be working on is this questions list component. And next, we're going to work on this component. So now, as we go through this quiz, so this is what we are going to see. So when I select the answer and click on submit, so now as you can see, the first question, it's going to be like this. And also notice right now we can be able to actually render the number of questions. And if I keep going like this, as you can see, so we're gonna work on building this logic. So let's go back to the VS Code, and I'm going to start from the context quiz provider. So here we're going to add two things or two states. So we're going to add the questions answered and the is quiz finished. So this is going to be an array of number, and of course this is going to be a boolean. So the reason why we created this because we need to store the indexes whenever we click on the question and we move on to the next question, we need to store the previous indexes. So that's why we created this questions answered as an array and the is quiz finished as you will see. So we are going to use this state. So when we go to the last question, so this state is going to help us to actually show the window so the user can know the result of the of taking this quiz. So now once we did this, the next thing that I'm going to go to is the page.tsx, and here inside this handle next function, so the first thing that we are going to do, we are going to store the index once we go to the next question. So, like for example, so I'm gonna open up the the console log, so the developer tools, and I'm gonna reload the page just to know what I'm talking about. So here I'm already logging the array. So when I click on this and I go to the next question, so as you can see, we actually stored the zero index, which is the first question. And if we go to the next question, so we're gonna store the 0 and 1 because we actually took the first and the second question. So that's what's going to happen. So with this line. So the reason why we're using this turning operator just to avoid like creating duplicates to know that if this has already been added. So if it is the case, so we're going to ignore this. Otherwise, we're going to add it. So that's why we're using this journey operator. So that's the first step, and then we need to go to the component, to this component, which is the quiz questions list.tsx, and here we are going to do also some modifications. So here we are going to add the questions answered array. And so we're going to use the use quiz hook. So we want to make sure that if this selected quiz is not null, so you can be able to safely access to these elements because we need to extract quizzes. And also because of this, we are going to get the length. And here we are going to actually add the length inside the span tag, which is this part, as you can see. So that's why we did all of this. And here inside the question or the quiz questions, we are going to add all of these properties. So the key is mandatory because React uses this for the DOM. And then we're having the index quiz. So we are going to add this index in here. So I'm going to just go through all of these properties. And once we go to this component, we'll know why we added all of this. And the current question index, so we're going to add it in here. The is passed, so we are going to use the questions answer that includes, and because this is going to be Boolean, since we're using the includes method, so we are going to see if the index quiz is already included inside the questions answered array. So we're going to use this into the GSX to be able to actually show this icon or the check icon. And also we are going to add the is current question so we can be able to know if this is the current question. So we can add this border, as you can see, just to let the user know that he is at this position. So we are going to add this, uh, and the condition it's going to be if the current question index is equal to the index question. So once we added all of these properties, so we're going to use them inside this actual component. So we're going to use uh, the is passed prompt. So based on this, so if it is true, we are going to make the text as red. Otherwise, it's going to be of this opacity. And also, we're going to use the is current question. So you can be able, as I said, to show the border. And here we are going to use also the is passed prompt to know whether we are going to render this check icon. So this is basically how we can be able to create this logic. And as you can see, things start getting a bit complex because we start adding more stuff just to be able to actually create everything needed to create this quiz page. So the next step is we need to actually store um, the points and how many answers has been correct or wrong. So, and I'm going to show you first inside the console log what is happening. So as you can see, I created a new object, so I'm going to show you how to be able to actually update this. So when I select an answer, and I click on submit answer. So as you can see, the object has been updated because it is wrong. So it's going to be, so we're going to have one question as inside the wrong property. So when I do this, it's going to be correct. And also notice that the points are going to be added because it is a correct answer. So if I do this, for example, so the wrong, so we're having two answers as wrong. And if I do the last one, so this is also wrong. So as you can see, our object has been updated successfully. And also I added a line of code to be able to actually update the circular bar. So let's go back to the VS Code to show you what I did. And as always, I'm going to start from this context API since here we are storing all the states that are going to be shared across all of the components. So the first thing that I did, I created this current states object, which is going to have the correct and the wrong and the points property as I showed you inside the console log. And of course, we need to go to the quiz context type and we need to define it this way inside this interface. And finally, we need to add it inside the value object, as you can see. And also, I created the reset. um I added the reset question because we're gonna use this when we start working on the dialog that is gonna open up so the user can see the results. So after I did this, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to the page.tsx and inside the handle next question, what we're going to do, we're going to create a function called the is correct or wrong calculation. So instead of putting all of this code in this function, which is going to make things a bit overwhelming. So I decided to put it inside this function. So I'm going to actually show you the logic that I used so you can be able to do this update. So the first thing that before this, I need to actually open up the the data structure just to know what I'm talking about. So as a reminder, here we're having the correct answers property. So we already defining what is the index that is related to the correct option. And also we're having the points if the answer is correct. So we need to actually access to these properties depending on the selected quiz. So we are going to access to the quizzes property, and then we're going to use the current question index to access to the index where the object lives, and then we are going to access to the correct answer property. And the same thing that we did for the points, and for whatever reason, if this doesn't work out, so uh, the current point it's gonna have the zero number. So after we did this, we're gonna use the set current states. So we need to do a copy because of how React works. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to actually re-render and update UI. So I'm not going to get into this into details. Then after this, we're going to make sure that the current correct answer is equal to the selected answer. And then we are going to update. So if this is true, meaning that it is the correct answer, so we're going to update or increment the correct property by one, and then we are going to increment the points property by the current point, which is this part. So for example, if we are at this quiz, the point is going to be 10. And if we are on this quiz, so the points is going to be 15. So, and finally, if this is not true, meaning that the user selected the wrong answer, so we are going to increment the wrong property by one, and then we're going to return this so we can be able to actually update the current states and do the update of the state. So this is basically how we can be able to create this. So we are pretty much done with this quiz page. So the only thing that we need to add is the window to be able to show the results of the quiz. So the last part of this page is to show the results after the user completes the quiz. So I'm going to show you the window. So after I click on submit answer, so we're going to have the window, as you can see, with all of the things that I showed you at the beginning of the project, the icon, um, a lot like the label and your score and how many answers correct and wrong and the points that you gained. When I click on the restart the quiz, as you can see, the quiz it's gonna be restarted again. So let's go back to the VS Code and the first thing that I'm going to show you, so as you can see, our project started getting a bit heavy because we added a lot of files. So I added this final results folder. So here we're going to add the final results.tsx. So this is the main component to be able to actually render this dialog. And as you can see, so we're going to use the ShadcnUI structure. We are going to use the alert dialog. And the reason why I use the alert dialog, not the dialog, because uh, I'm going to open this up. So when I click outside, nothing happens. So it's still there. So that's the advantage of using the alert dialog. Meanwhile, the dialog, when you click outside of it, it's going to be closed. So that's the reason why I did so. So let's start talking about the code and the logic behind everything in here. So as you can see, the alert dialog, it has the open property. So the open property, it's going to be linked to the is quiz finished. So that's why we created this state and I showed you that into the console log. When we finish, we go to the final question and click on submit answer. This turns to true, and then we're going to use this inside the open property of the alert dialog component to be able to actually show this up into the browser. So also we're using the selected quiz, the current state, so you're gonna know why we did so. So here, as you can see, we're using the use router. So from Next.js to be able to actually use the refresh method to refresh the page. So we're going to use this inside the restart quiz. So this we're going to call this, and also we're going to call the reset quiz function that is coming from the use quiz. So, and that's something that I didn't point out is this is the actual function. So we are gonna reinitialize everything like the current index, it's gonna be 0. This is gonna be an empty array. The quiz finish is gonna be false. So all the default values, we are going to do all of them inside this function, and then we can be able to call it inside the restart quiz function. So now let's go to the GSX. So this is you can get this from the ShadcnUI website to actually use correctly the structure of this dialog. So I'm not going to get into this. So here, as you can see, we're having this dialog body. So I created this in another component rather than putting everything in this, which is going to make things a bit longer. So in this body component, it's responsible for rendering everything until this part. We're having these two buttons at the bottom that are inside the final results component, but everything in here, it's going to be inside this component. So we're going to call these, and then we are going to actually separate all the components and different functions. So instead of putting everything in one GSX, so we are going to separate all of these inside their own function. So this is the header. So everything is going to be inside this object. So this is the header. So we're having the quiz results, and also we're having the current stats dot points. So the points we're gonna get them from the current stats that I showed you in the console log. And here inside the score, so the score function, it's gonna be responsible. It's gonna be responsible for this part. So if we go back, we are going to actually get the question numbers, and also we are going to do the calculation. So we're having a calculate score function to be able to calculate the percentage. So if we go to this function, so it's going to be inside uh, this file. So as you can see, we're having some code in here. I'm going to do my best to explain everything in this step by step. So we're having the correct answers as a parameter and the total questions. So we're going to do a simple equation in here to calculate the percentage. And then we are going to initialize this object because what we want is we want this object to return we want this function, sorry, to return an object like this. So we initialize that this way, and here based on the calculate score, we are going to return the message and we're going to return the icon. So that's why we get different icons and different text based on the results that we got. So this function or this if statement, it's going to do this for us. And then we're going to return the results in a form of this object that has the score, the message, and the icon. So that's why if we go to the final results that body, so as you can see, we are going to access to the calculate score and then we're going to use it inside the span. And for the analysis function, so here we are going to just render the correct answers and the wrong answers, and then we are going to access again inside the current stats dot correct and here dot wrong. So and we are going to call each one because since all of these functions are inside the body parts object, so this is how we are going to call everything like this, just to make sure that our code is cleaner and organized. So this is basically how we can be able to create this. So thankfully that I explained all everything that is related to this component, and we have in pretty much this quiz is completed. So one last thing that we need to do, we need to store this information inside the local storage. But first, we need to create a custom hook for authentication logic that's going to handle the storage, the deletion and the add-in of the information inside the local storage. So we need to create this first, and then we can go back to this part inside the quiz page to be able to actually store the information inside the local storage.